So we're going to continue dividing rationals. If you remember, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our division sign and we're changing it to multiplication. And the reason that we're able to do this is because we're flipping our second numbers. So we're multiplying by our reciprocal. That gives us 4x to the fifth y over x squared y squared. Changing it to multiplication, 3x to the fourth y to the negative 1 over 8x to the negative 2 y to the sixth. Now, after we change it to multiplication, we're going to multiply across. 4 times 3 gives us a 12. What we're going to do next is we're going to add the exponents. 5 plus 4 gives us a 9. This is a 1. This is a negative 1. That right there becomes 0. We're looking at the denominator. We have an 8. We have a 2 plus a negative 2. That's another 0. We have a 2 and a 6. That right there gives us an 8. What we're going to do next is we're going to reduce. When we reduce, what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the 12 and the 8. And that right there, they both have a 4 in common. So that becomes 4 over 3. We're going to look at the x's. More x's on top. 9 minus 0 is 9. So there are 9 x's on top. 0 and 8, there's more y's on the bottom, and that would be 8 more. So that right there gives us our first answer. What we need to do next is we need to state our excluded values. When we're stating our excluded values, we're always looking at what gives us 0 in the denominator. And just like the one above, x cannot equal 0 and y cannot equal 0. Why it's x and y is because we have x's and y's, not just x's. And that right there gives us our second answer. Now, if we're looking at letter E, if you remember last time, what we're trying to do is we're going to factor and flip at the same time. It just saves us some space, saves us some time. So we keep the 7x squared, and what we're noticing is that we have a GCF, a greatest common factor, and the greatest common factor is going to be a 2 and an x. And if we divide each of these by 2x, we're left with an x minus 4. We change it to multiplication because we're flipping the second ones. So when we flip it, what we notice is that the 14x to the fifth is on the bottom. What we see right here is a special factoring pattern. Notice that we can take the square root of each one. So that gives us an x minus 4, and it gives us an x plus 4. Now, my favorite part, I'm going to be canceling. I look at the x minus 4s. Those can cancel. I see that the 7 can cancel with the 14. I see x squared cancels with the 5. And on top, notice everything cancels. So it's a 1. On the bottom, 2 times 2 gives me a 4. I have 1x. I have 3 x's. That would be x to the fourth. And oh my gosh, I almost forgot. If I'm looking at right there, I have the 1, but I totally forgot this right here. So that would be an x plus 4. I'm going to squeeze that in so it looks like I didn't make any mistakes. So that right there gives us our answer. Now, excluded values. If I'm looking at the excluded values is what gives us 0 in the denominator. This, of course, would be 0. So x cannot equal 0. This would be a positive 4. So x cannot equal a positive 4. This would be another 0. But remember, we always have to look at our original. And that was the x plus 4 and the x minus 4. So that gives us a positive 4, which we already have. No need to write it twice. But this one right here is a negative 4. So we actually have a negative 4 in there too. So we have to be a little careful with divisions. Definitely more difficult with the excluded values. Okay, looking at our last problem. Once again, I'm going to be factoring and flipping at the same time. So in order to do that, I see that they both have a 3 in common, so I factor out a 3, and that gives me an x minus 3. Ooh, and I hope you noticed it should have been a 2x minus 3. It's going to be a big deal later. If I'm looking at the denominator, once again, another GCF. This time, it's a 3 and an x, and I have an x plus 1. As I said before, factoring and flipping at the same time. So I'm going to take this right here. Two numbers that multiply together give me 2 and add up to 3 would be 2 and 1. Since it's on the bottom, I'm putting it on the top, x plus 2 and x plus 1. This last one that I left for the very end is the most difficult because I have a leading coefficient of 4. So remember, I multiply those two. 4 times 9 gives me 36. So what I have is a 36 on top. I have a negative 12 on the bottom, which would be negative 6 and negative 6. Since the leading coefficient is 4, I divide each of these by 4, but it's not that easy because 6 and 4 actually reduce to 3 and 2. So that means that when I factor it, it becomes 2x minus 3 and 2x minus 3 because both of them have the subtraction sign. So both of them are minus 3. Now my favorite part, I'm canceling. I see a 2x minus 3, like I said before. Good thing I remembered that too, otherwise it would have been a pain. I notice that I have a 3 in common, so that also cancels. I have an x plus 1, so that cancels. What I'm left with is an x plus 2 on the top. On the bottom, I have an x. And I also have a 2x minus 3. And that right there is me simplifying it. But, as a lot of you have thought already, excluded values, let's not forget them. If we're looking at our excluded values, it's what gives us 0 in the denominator. That would be 0. X cannot equal 0. This right here is a 1, so it cannot equal negative 1. This right here is a 3/2, since there's 2 of them. I only have to put 1. But remember our original. That would be these ones right here. So that would be -2 and -1. I already have the -1. No need to put it again. I just have to add the -2. And that right there is my final answer.